It's time for Recipe of the Day. Happy New Year! I am so excited about 2026. I hope you and I both have a delicious and fun-filled, wonderful year. I am celebrating today with a classic New Year's Day dish. This is pork chops with sauerkraut. Now, pork and sauerkraut together are considered especially lucky in Germany and in Poland and in parts of the United States to have at the beginning of the year. And I have often done a classic pork roast with sauerkraut, and I will link to that for you here, that recipe. And I've also done it in the Instant Pot, so I will link to that for you as well. But when I want this to come together a little bit more quickly, or if I'm making it like on a normal weeknight, not on New Year's Day, and I want those flavors, but like weeknight style, quick dinner, then I do thin pork chops and sauerkraut. It is super delicious, super easy. You are going to love this one. So I am using thin cut pork chops here. You'll remember these. I've called them breakfast chops before. I will link to the basic way of cooking these for you, but we are using those. The ones that I like are about a ½ inch thick at most, and they have a little bit of bone in them still, so they're a little bit juicier because of that bit of bone. They're about 6 ounces each, and we're going to use 4 of them. And I'm going to tell you later when I'm telling you how to make the recipe what to do if your pork chops are thicker. If you have a thicker cut of pork chop, you could totally use it here. You're just going to adjust the recipe a little bit, and I will talk about that later. And if you have a thin cut boneless chop, you'll do exactly what I'm telling you to do. And if you have a thicker cut boneless chop, you will do what you do for the thick cut chops that I'll tell you about later. Okay, so what you're going to do first, no matter what kind of pork chop you have, is to get out a big bowl and mix together in that bowl 1/3 cup of flour, a ½ teaspoon of salt, a ½ teaspoon of pepper, and a ½ teaspoon of garlic powder. Then you're going to add your 4 pork chops into there and just dredge them all over, coating them all over in the flour. If there's any flour left, you can discard it. We do not need it for the rest of this recipe. And I say that only because my smothered pork chop recipe does have you keep that flour to use to thicken a sauce later, but we are not doing that here. So if you have leftover flour, you can throw that out. Okay, then you're going to get out a large skillet, the biggest one you have, and you are heating 2 tablespoons of cooking oil. I tend to use grapeseed oil. You can use vegetable oil, olive oil, whatever you like. You're going to heat that over medium-high heat. Now, even in a big skillet, the 4 pork chops are going to kind of fill the whole thing. I don't worry about doing this in batches though, because the pork chops aren't cooking for that long. They're not getting that brown anyhow, and the flour does help a little bit. And if I'm doing this for a quick weeknight, I'm not doing things in batches. I just am not. If you really want to, you can do 2 first, brown them on both sides, then take those out, do the other 2, brown them on both sides, take those out, and then proceed. But I'm saying do all 4 of them. So heat the oil in a large skillet over medium-high heat, add all 4 of the pork chops in a single layer overlapping as little as possible, and cook them until they're browned a bit underneath, about 2 to 3 minutes. Then flip them over and do the other side. Then take them out of the skillet, cover them with foil to keep warm. You're going to just have them on a plate or something covered in foil. Then reduce the heat to medium, and you're adding 1 large onion that you've chopped up and a small apple that you've cored and finely chopped. The apple is kind of going to disappear into here. You'll taste it a little bit, but it's just adding that little bit of sweetness, something a little different within the sauerkraut, which is going to go in soon. So onion and apple, cook, stirring that occasionally, just until softened, 2 or 3 minutes. Then you need to add some drained sauerkraut. So probably you should have drained it earlier, and I should have told you to do it earlier, but that's okay. You're just going to take 32 ounces of sauerkraut, whether that is a canned variety or a jarred variety, or sometimes it's sold in pouches, or maybe you've made your own. You need 32 ounces of it, and you're going to put it in a colander and drain all the liquid off, kind of push down on it so that most of the liquid comes out. You don't want that. It's kind of extra salty, and we don't need that in there. So then once it's drained, you're adding that sauerkraut to your onion and apple mixture. And at this point, you can also add optionally a ½ cup of liquid. You don't have to. It's really just about how moist or dry you want this to be. It's going to be pretty juicy without the liquid. The liquid just makes it a little bit juicier. And if you are somebody who loves beer with their sauerkraut and pork, then your liquid of choice here is going to be beer, ½ cup of it. A darker beer is often more traditional here, a dark lager, but I prefer a lighter one, a light lager, so it doesn't overpower the other flavors. You can instead use some apple cider, which will add a bit of sweetness, or you could just use chicken stock, or you can omit the liquid entirely. I will say that is only true if you are using the thin sliced pork chops. If you have thicker ones that are going to cook for a little bit longer, when we add them back in, then you're going to want to add the liquid for sure to make sure that the sauerkraut doesn't dry out while the pork is cooking through. So if you have the thin pork chops, you get to choose whether you add the liquid or not, choose whether you want the beer in there or not. If you are doing thicker pork chops, you are definitely going in with that half cup of liquid here, beer or whatever you want to add. Okay, so you've added the sauerkraut and maybe you've added some liquid, stir that up and then push the sauerkraut over to the side of the skillet and put 2 of the pork chops in the space that you've made there. Then pile all the sauerkraut on top of those 2, add your other 2 pork chops to the space that you've made there. Then distribute the sauerkraut evenly over the pork chops and cover your skillet, and you're going to simmer it until the pork chops are heated through, no longer pink inside. If you're using a thermometer, which is hard to do with the thin cut ones, but you can do with the thicker ones, you want a minimum 145 degree Fahrenheit temperature. For the thin chops, it's going to take 5 to 7 minutes. For thicker, it kind of depends on how thick they are, but it's not going to be more than 10 to 12 minutes more because you browned them on both sides. They were staying warm. They were cooking. So it's probably from the time you add them back in and put the lid on, it's going to be about 10-ish minutes if they are thicker. Then you're just taking those chops out, serving them with the sauerkraut over top. I love this with mashed potatoes. Sauerkraut and mashed potatoes is one of my favorites. So that is a great thing to serve with this. I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date, so it's helpful to know that today is January 1st of 2026. I am Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookville.com, the all-new chicken cookbook, cookfor2.us, and this podcast recipe of the day. Happy New Year. Let's get cooking.